mucho tiempo, hay algo que quiero decirte. Estoy sintiendo.
Thank you, Dr. Mesa, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. Yeah. It's my pleasure to join all the previous speakers in welcoming you to the 2014 SACNAS National Conference. The mission of the Society for the Advancement of Hispanics, Chicanos, and Native Americans in Science is one that the University of California shares and supports. It is to foster the success of Hispanic, Chicano, and Native American scientists, from college students to professionals, to attain advanced degrees, careers, and positions of leadership in science. Now, fundamentally, when we talk about diversity, whether in the STEM disciplines or elsewhere, what we are talking about is leadership. There's the leadership needed to keep the pressure on educational and institutional leaders to raise the number of Hispanic, Chicanos, and Native Americans in science. And by keeping up that pressure, we will develop more Hispanic, Chicano, and Native American leaders in science. And by the way, keep the pressure on me too, because we all need to commit to these efforts. You know, throughout the last 40 years, SACNAS has proven to be a pivotal player on the leadership front. That's why today, the University of California is home to 9 vibrant SACNAS chapters. 8 UC campuses have served as elite sponsors for the SACNAS conference, and 3 of the other speakers this afternoon are either graduates or on the faculty of the University of California. As has been stated, the theme of this year's conference is creativity, vision, and drive toward full representation in STEM. And you're going to hear a lot about that theme over the next couple of days. You'll see poster presentations that demonstrate the drive and creativity necessary to succeed in the sciences. I'll ask you, take the time, ask lots of questions, learn about something new. You will participate in conversations with scientists that foster the vision of increasing Hispanic, Chicano, and Native American leadership in the STEM disciplines. Personally, every time I meet another University of California faculty member, whether in the sciences or the humanities, you name it, I always come away dazzled by the sharing of new knowledge. You learn something, and there are many people in this room to learn from. I encourage you to participate fully in these conversations and explore and discuss the insights that your fellow conference attendees have to share. I'm also here to speak with you about the conference theme this afternoon, but from a slightly different perspective. Creativity, vision, and drive are important building blocks for reaching full representation in STEM. But taking a larger view, they are also important building blocks for society writ large. Now, here in California, our society is in constant motion. For starters, there are rapidly changing demographics, and there are ramifications to the change in those demographics. And there are lots of questions about how California intends to move forward in light of that change. What do we need to do to ensure that California has a future as bright and vigorous as its past? How do we harness the creativity, the vision, the drive of all Californians into building that future? Now, the Los Angeles Convention Center is an interesting place to raise these questions. because the building is relatively new, but the venue has a long history. A little more than 54 years ago, the LA Convention Center convened another major gathering with thousands of attendees. It was the 1960 Democratic National Convention, the convention that nominated John F. Kennedy to be the President of the United States. Now, JFK accepted the nomination just up Figueroa Street at the Coliseum. And when he did, he delivered what became one of the most famous speeches of the 21st century. Today, it is known as the New Frontier speech. And I should have said 20th century, but it applies to the 21st as well. In that speech, JFK spoke of the pioneers who, a few generations earlier, had journeyed here to the West Coast to build a new society upon what he called the last frontier. And he praised those pioneers, and then he turned to the delegates in front of him. They faced, he said, a frontier of their own. For the world is changing, he said. The old era is ending. The old ways will not do. The new frontier, he said, is here, whether we seek it or not. And then he said this, quote, I believe that the times require imagination and courage and perseverance. I am asking each of you to be pioneers towards that new frontier. President Kennedy's words could not have been more prescient for the times in which we live today. The world, again, is changing. The old era is ending. And the new frontier is here, whether we seek it or not. And with this new frontier comes new challenges. As the pages of the LA Times or the New York Times, the bloggers and the commentators and all the talking heads make clear every day, the only certainty about the future is uncertainty. And it's no longer about brawn, it's about brains. It's no longer about exploitation, it's about innovation. In California, the world rushed in to exploit one of our natural resources, gold, more than a century and a half ago. The gold rush was the big boom that made this state the great exception, to quote Carrie McWilliams. But California was given only one great gold rush. And all the triumphs and accomplishments that have followed have been done not with mining picks, but with brains. Creativity, innovation, the ability to dream and hope and aspire to think big, when cobbled together with the drive and delight in taking on the next big thing, those are California's true natural resources. They're the resources we need to nurture and protect. And we need to protect the institutions that foster them. Now, I'm speaking about California, but I think in this next section, what I'm going to share with you is applicable to every state of the United States. Demographics. As I mentioned before, demographics are changing. As of this year, Hispanics make up 39% of California's population. They're the largest single racial group in this state, just ahead of the next group, non-Hispanic whites, who make up 38.8% of the population. And the numbers are climbing and climbing and climbing fast. Crucially, the percentage is even higher for the young. Nearly 50% of high school graduates in the state today are Hispanic, and the numbers are still rising. But it's at the point right after high school where the demographic is hitting some turbulence. You see, 63% of Hispanics graduate from high school, but only 13% of Hispanics graduate from college. This is a big problem. If California does not figure out how to educate its young and booming Hispanic population, the consequences will be most severe. We all want to live in a society in which people vote, buy houses, go to work, pay it all forward for the next generation. And this will not happen unless vast numbers of individuals have access to and graduate from high-quality institutions of higher education. Now, again, speaking to California, but applicable across the country, there are glimmers of hope. California produces more higher education degrees than any other state. About 1/10 of all of the college degrees in the United States come out of California. At last count, almost 190,000 students were pursuing bachelor's degrees at the University of California alone. That doesn't even include the California State University system or the private universities and colleges that people are state. More than 20% of these college students are Hispanic, and Hispanics count for the second highest group in this year's entering class at the University of California. In fact, for the first time in California history, this year, the University of California enrolled more Hispanic students as freshmen than it enrolled non-Hispanic white students. That is a significant change. But I think we can and we have to do better. I intend to challenge the state leadership of California to expand capacity in all segments of public higher education, including the UC. And my challenge to them is also a challenge to you. By virtue of your membership and participation in SACNAS, I know that you are doers, joiners, active members of your communities. I'm pretty sure you didn't come to LA just to have a good time, though I hope you do have a good time while you're here. The point is that expanding capacity will not happen until people other than university presidents demand it. It won't happen until you demand it. Living in California is not like starring in an episode of Survivor. We're not going to vote one cohort off the island to make room for another. We need to build a bigger island, and we need to get serious about higher education. For too long, all we've heard about is how to cut the costs of education. Message received. And universities around the country have been cutting costs dramatically, reducing programs, eliminating faculty positions, etc. But cutting costs does not allow us to increase enrollment. And we cannot cut costs and expect, much less grow, the quality of a higher education and what a university degree stands for. We need to insist on access, on affordability, and on excellence. That's what our new frontier requires. So, what can you do? We need together to make the case that more students need to be admitted into our nation's universities, particularly in the STEM area. Why? Because the economy needs more STEM-educated individuals. We need to make the case that higher education needs to grow because the United States economy will only thrive if it is an innovation-based economy, and we need more students prepared to be innovators. And we always need to make the case that our country, a democracy, requires our citizenry to be engaged and to be educated, and that distinguishes us from countries around the world. I also think there's a moral case that we need to make here. We, and I'm speaking now to the adults in this room, those of us who've already been through our formal educations, we have a moral imperative to serve the rising generation, just as our country served generations in the past, from the GIs who returned from World War II to the baby boomers. The students of today, the students I am looking at across this ballroom, deserve the equality of opportunity that we had, and we need to fight to make it so. The day will come when all of us in this hall will pass the torch to a new generation of Californians, a new generation of Americans, the pioneers of a new frontier. I am asking you to invest of yourselves in this conference. Do not waste these days. Do not take these days for granted. They don't come all that often. We need you to spend these days demonstrating the creativity and the vision and the drive that brought you here in the first place. You know, the University of California that I'm privileged to lead, we will not survive and thrive without your support and advocacy. California will not survive and thrive without the University of California. And this country will not thrive without the great access to higher education and to great public universities that have brought us this far. Please join me in this advocacy. Join me in these efforts. Let's fight for the new frontier. Thank you.
Por mucho tiempo hay algo que quiero decirte.